Welcome to CryptoBears podcast, a podcast about ICOs, blockchain, and interviews with the crypto community. From Sydney, Australia, welcome to CryptoBears podcast. This is our second episode. Yay! I have to say thank you for the people who listened the first one. Thank you so much. I will try to do much better this time, okay? So, let's start. 2 weeks ago, I was in Melbourne attending the Intersekt festival. It's the biggest Fintech festival in Australia and one of the biggest in the Asia Pacific. These days is the Fintech festival in Singapore. Anyway, I don't know why. All the time I'm attending blockchain conference and events. There are not so many girls, not many ladies there. Why? Are the cryptocurrencies so boring for you ladies? You don't like trading? You don't like Bitcoin, Ethereum, ICOs? Anyway, after the Intersekt festival was my birthday. And you know, I'm getting older. So now my birthday party takes 1 week. So I was celebrating the whole week in Melbourne. And I said to me, Trikar, you have to disconnect from the cryptos. Don't check CoinMarketCap in 1 week. But I couldn't because the Bitcoin price was $7,500. Yay! So yeah, I sold half of Bitcoin. So I have the double. I remember the good times when I go to bed, relax, I'll calm down. But now I sleep with my phone, and before I go to sleep, I check the crypto market, and sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night. Then check again the market just in case the Europeans or Americans are pumping the Bitcoin. Last weekend was crazy with Bitcoin crash. Oh my god. I thought, because of the fall, maybe the Bitcoin cash could raise, $1,000. And I still holding at the time a little bit of Bitcoin cash. So yeah, I have a sell option in Bitrex to sell about $1,300. And I went to sleep. So when I wake up that morning, I said, what the fuck is going on? The price was $2,000, something like that. So yeah, I couldn't change the sell option. So I of course I had profit. So yeah, better than nothing. Don't be greedy with the cryptocurrencies. The Australian people are super happy these days. Why? Because the same-sex marriage is gonna be legal soon. Yay! Congratulations! Now, even though I'm not gay, I have more chances to get a couple visa. As I said, almost no women in the crypto world. So if you want some satoshis, contact me and let's make a deal. I don't want to leave Australia. The Australian government spent more than 100 million in make a non-mandatory survey asking Aussies if they support the same-sex marriage. 61% say yes. 100 million is a lot of money to make a survey. Voting using blockchain is cheaper and reliable. 2 weeks ago, Horizon Estate, one Australian ICO, raised $1.4 million. They can save money using blockchain for voting. Traditional methods of voting cost taxpayers around $7 per vote or $25 in some cases. Horizon Estate blockchain voting solution is far cheaper, remaining under 50 cents. Really interesting project. I believe that the future of voting is using blockchain. As I said at the beginning of this episode, I was attending the Intersekt Fintech Festival in Melbourne. One whole day was dedicated to blockchain. At morning, Jason Lee and Nelson Valero from NEM Foundation made a briefing showing how NEM has the smart asset blockchain and how it became the top 10 cryptocurrency by market capitalization. This week, NEM is attending the Singapore Fintech Festival. I will try to contact them to know more about the new updates of the platform and also to know more about new ICOs based in NEM blockchain. Another topic was the ICOs regulation, especially in China. One Chinese venture capital was there explaining what's going on in China after the ICO ban. With Neo in a good position, another ICOs moved to different countries such as Japan or Singapore to develop their projects. Blockchain is a big deal for Chinese industry, so it's a matter of time until the Chinese regulators allow ICOs again. Is there space in Australia for solar energy ICOs after the success of Power Ledger? I think so. Solara was presenting their project. It's still in early stage, but you can apply for the whitelist in their website solara.io. In the afternoon, the final conference and the party was at the Blockchain Center. The Blockchain Center is the world's first not-for-profit blockchain technology community hub and co-working space. Now, they're expanding opening centers in Shanghai, Kuala Lumpur, and recently they announced in the festival the new blockchain center in Lithuania. By the way, Tony G was there. He's a member of the European Parliament and he's involved in different blockchain projects such as Bankera. Nobody's paying me for saying that, but I have to say that the blockchain center is a really cool place. They are doing very well, especially with education programs in schools and university, and also doing events every week for newbies in the crypto world. Every Monday, they have free co-working space. Just apply in the website www.blockchaincenter.com.au. Today we have in our studio a special guest, the CEO of Fintech Australia, Danielle Szheto. Hi, welcome.
Hi, Ricardo. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Nice to be here, un placer.
She speaks a little bit of Spanish.
Not well.
Not well. The interview is in English, so don't worry about that. Thank you for being with CryptoBears. So please, let's start. Do you have Bitcoins?
Yes, I do. It's a bit hard to talk about these things without knowing what you're talking about, so I thought it was important for myself to get involved.
Do you believe in Bitcoin? Like, not like a cryptocurrency, like a useful platform or technology for transactions in the future or now?
Absolutely. We've believed in Bitcoin for quite some time. Fintech Australia as an organisation has been helping the community to actually work with the government to develop some friendly policy developments to ensure that we're actually supporting the growth of the blockchain and Bitcoin cryptocurrency industry in Australia. So whether it was advising them on the eventual removal of goods and services tax from the purchase of digital currencies to making sure that digital currency exchanges were also captured under the Australian regulatory oversight. That's the Australian regulator AUSTRAC. We've been working to make sure that the design of these policies has been supportive of the industry, so not too onerous, not too heavy-handed, and well designed in consideration of how they work, which is obviously important to making sure that we have stable growth of the industry.
I read somewhere that there is a pilot to make a Australian digital dollar with blockchain, so the people can use it instead of Bitcoin or Ethereum. Could you explain a little bit how it works?
Sure, though of course this is a bit of a complex area and I have to admit I'm not the biggest expert of how it all works, but obviously I know a lot of people who are. So Fintech Australia's role in this is that we have been helping a number of companies to come together and to basically petition the government to support or endorse a project or a sequence of projects, what we call a pilot program, to help explore the possibilities and to test the hypothesis that a digital Australian dollar, or effectively a sovereign digital currency, could help some of these blockchain-based businesses to transact in a much more effective and efficient way. Some of the problems that they're actually seeing as they're developing these blockchain solutions is that they're finding it very difficult to actually use cryptocurrencies instead of digital instead of a fiat currency.
Yeah.
For example, by using something like Bitcoin or some of the other types of cryptos, unfortunately, the volatility in the value of these crypto coins makes it very difficult for end users to be able to actually transact easily. Not to mention that, for some of these use cases, there are eventual endpoints that deal with other legacy types of infrastructure. So it might be traditional financial services institutions or research bodies that don't transact currently in cryptocurrencies. So, having to actually swap in and out of from crypto to fiat makes it challenging. And so what we were actually looking at is, well, could we potentially create a digital representation of the Australian dollar, or what we kind of like to call programmable money.
Okay.
Which basically means that you can attach some automated contracts or smart contracts and effectively a set of programmed instructions to parcels of value that constitute parcels of the Australian dollar. So rather than actually kind of minting a new coin and calling it the digital Aussie dollar and having that backed by a Federal Reserve Bank, we're actually looking at how you actually attach instructions and automate that process, which is more what this is about. This may involve the creation of a digital Aussie dollar. It may involve doing that through something or a mechanism similar to what sort of effectively underpins a cryptocurrency, or it may actually take completely different forms. We don't know. The point is that we need to facilitate some means of being able to test that and to explore whether or not that actually results in efficiencies that would make it a viable opportunity for businesses to explore.
Do you know if more countries are doing that, or Australia is the only one to looking at?
We certainly know that there are a lot of regulators who are exploring this, or effectively taking the thought experiments to try and explore it. And they're exploring it across a number of different use cases and applications. So you can certainly look at the Singaporean government and the work they're doing with Project Ubin. And of course, they've extended that now to work with the Bank of Canada. There's a number of different governments around the world who are also taking lots of different steps to encourage and facilitate exploration with cryptocurrencies, so they can start to get a handle of how they should actually be treating these things going forward. So no, the Australian government is certainly not unique in that sense. Even China, who certainly had the strongest kind of response to the ICO and cryptocurrency market. They're certainly exploring use cases and applications of the blockchain industry, which could extend to something like a digital RMB.
Wow, so maybe in the future, every country has their own cryptocurrency, and we don't need to use Bitcoin or Ethereum anymore, and we have to use the local cryptocurrency.
Well, I think it's going to not necessarily be a case of either or. As with everything, I think it's going to be more of a case of just having lots of different alternatives. It's not like we only have a USD or an RMB. At the moment, we have multiple currencies across the world. So if anything, I think what we're doing is looking at extending the existing set and giving more capability to the existing set of traditional fiat currencies. As well as adding other types of currencies to the mix. So in a sense, we're actually just proliferating more options for companies to use rather than less.
So let's talk now a little bit about the ICOs. In your association, in Fintech Australia, you have venture capitals, right? Members.
We have quite a few different venture capital firms.
Crowdfunding companies as well.
Yes, crowdfunding intermediaries, because Fintech Australia was also probably the leading group with respect to the development of the equity crowdfunding regime in Australia.
So do you have some ICOs in Fintech Australia, or maybe in the future?
We're certainly seeing a number of different blockchain companies launching ICOs, some of them who are our members. Though one thing that I will certainly say is that whilst I am a believer in, ICOs as a means to raise funds, I am very cautious of ICOs generally. I think we do see a number of very legitimate blockchain companies that are leveraging ICOs because effectively, tokens form a valuable part of their own blockchain design. And to me, that's actually quite important because really fundamentally, you have ICOs as a mechanism to raise funds, but you also have tokens as a mechanism of internal value generation within a particular project. And certainly from my perspective in what I see of companies that are looking to leverage ICOs, the ones that I see tend to do well really understand the dynamics between the two. They're not just looking at it as a mechanism for raising funds. And, you want them to actually understand what it is they're doing, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it means that company has a much higher chance of being successful. But certainly, as I look at it from a broader industry context, I do think ICOs are pretty exciting because effectively what you're looking at is another mechanism or another alternative to fundraising in Australia or internationally. You have venture capital, and it's quite well known that in Australia, the venture capital market was not particularly deep. That is changing.
Okay.
Just this week, we actually saw the announcement from our Venture Capital Association that Australia had now hit 1.3 billion in venture capital currently raised and available to startups from Australia, which is, a significant increase on last year. And angel investment is also picking up. The crowdfunding regime for public companies comes online any day now, with a number of different intermediaries about to get their license granted from ASIC. But still, the private company regime is yet to be passed through Parliament. And until we see that, we're still going to need other ways for companies to raise funds. And ICOs have actually kind of stepped in to take up that funding slack. But the challenges with that, of course, are that, ICOs at this particular point in time are still a fairly unknown quantity. And people are still not entirely sure, even if they go to great lengths about how they design their ICO tokens, whether or not they will be able to continue or whether the decisions they've made about the design of their tokens will still be able to evade regulations. Though, in my view, I think the smartest companies are the ones that are actually not seeking to evade the regulations. They're actually seeking to meet them through the ICO design.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those things are very important, because at the end of the day, I think what investors are looking for, whether they're retail investors seeking to invest through an ICO or a venture capital fund that's seeking to invest via traditional means, or even a mix of both. Ultimately, what people are looking for is a company that understands their obligations and will be as successful as possible in actually achieving the goals that they're setting out to achieve.
Yeah, but I invest in ICOs and following some ICOs. I've seen some people are really impatient, because at the end, the ICO is another startup. But, the venture capital, they wait 5 years maybe to get the profit, right?
Absolutely. And that's actually the game. And that's, I think, what a lot of people who are sort of speculating at the moment on ICOs probably don't actually realize as they get into this particular industry. And of course, there is a level of short-term speculation, which a lot of people are doing. So they're kind of getting in at that very early stage and then getting out very quickly, which, in many respects is probably more similar to the type of behavior you see at IPO stage, where companies are actually listing. But let's not forget that generally when companies are at the stage where they're IPOing on a stock exchange, they have a very clear proven business model, and they're already companies that are in full operation. They're generating revenue, they're already quite profitable or very close to profitability, or have a very clear pathway to profitability built off the back of a solid sort of foundation. What we sort of see in ICOs is extremely early stage companies. In many cases, those companies are actually even pre-MVP or minimum viable product. They're just an idea. And so when you look at the numbers behind that, the probability that these companies will actually succeed in the long term is somewhere between 1% and 5%, as opposed to, those at the IPO stage, which have effectively made it. So it makes sense to speculate on those. However, if a retail investor is expecting any form of return from some of these super speculative ICO stage companies, I think, their expectations are certainly misaligned. It takes a long time to build a viable business. There are always going to be things that are going to go wrong. And people, it takes the best types of founders to be able to come up against those challenges, work out how to get around those challenges, and how to actually then effectively build a solid business. And that includes hiring people, firing people if necessary, navigating that country's regulations, making sure they can actually have a decent customer acquisition strategy, all the typical things that you need when you're building a company.
Yeah. So when the ICO is done, some investors just want to sell the tokens in the exchanges the day after. These traders don't care at all about the project behind. Because of that, some ICOs are learning from the mistakes of other ICOs, and now the token is not available in exchanges the day after ICO finish. Tokens are blocked, so the team can focus in the project, and when it's ready, tokens are free for trading.
Evening out of this industry, where a lot of companies came to the ICO market expecting that it would be very easy for them to be able to get access to capital from a bunch of retail investors who seemed not to care about whether the company needed to prove itself or not. I think they're increasingly finding that at the end of the day, you're trying to obtain money from people and you're setting expectations that you ultimately need to meet. And if a retail consumer isn't backing your project, if they're just in it to basically pick up your tokens and then dump them later, that's not the type of investor you want, because they're not going to be sticking with you for the long term. And they're going to be the ones that dump your ICO and effectively make your tokens valueless, which doesn't actually then help those investors who are actually with you for the long term because they believe in your project. And if you then need to come back to them for a second round of funding, as many companies do, that's the way it works. You kind of raise funds to be able to get to the right stages and milestones, and then you complete another round of capital raising off the back of what you've done. It's very, very difficult to go back to that second round of investors and ask for more money if you haven't necessarily delivered the returns, and that's actually been affected by the large number of potential investors who've just been there to speculate.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk now about Fintech Australia. Surprisingly, I saw that some of your members are making business using blockchain without doing an ICO, right?
Yeah, so Fintech Australia has around about 170 startup company members, well, startups, hubs, accelerators, and VCs across Australia. And a number of them are actually focused on more, well, you could call it traditional fintech. We have companies spanning the gamut of wealth and investment, asset management, regulatory technologies or RegTech, insurtech, payments, blockchain as well. But the blockchain companies we have, I mean, I think we recently did some research into the contours of the Australian fintech landscape with EY, and we found that some 5% of companies in Australia are actually focused in the blockchain space, or at least 5% of the fintech industry. And a lot of these companies are actually focused in areas that are not just traditional financial services, they're actually focusing on a very large variety of intersections. So whether they might be the intersections of fintech with supply chain and agriculture, like companies like AgriDigital, or whether they might actually be in other areas like, supply chain for other types of logistics like shipping. There's all sorts of different kind of companies that are in that space. But of course, we do also represent quite a number of different traditional crypto firms. So whether it might be companies like BitRocket, Living Room of Satoshi, a great Brisbane-based startup that's been helping to process, helping Bitcoin buyers or people with Bitcoin to pay traditional bills with Bitcoin.
Yeah, I see a little bit about the Living Room of Satoshi, and you can pay your bills, right? You can pay the energy, the gas.
And if you go to their website, it's actually amazing to see the sorts of things that people are actually paying through this particular platform. They pay everything from school fees to energy bills. I think the last count I saw, they were processing some $500,000 Australian worth of bills every week now in Bitcoin, which is a tremendous growth. I think that points to sort of how the blockchain and cryptocurrency industry is actually growing in Australia, and how Australian consumers are actually very, very adept at taking up these new technologies and very quickly moving to adopt them into their daily lives. And in fact, in Melbourne and in Sydney, there's a number of different large institutions that are starting to really take an interest in cryptocurrencies. So whether it's banks like ANZ and CBA that are doing a lot of experimentation with it, in fact, all four major banks, but even some of our major universities like the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology or Data61, the government organisation, all sort of launching sort of blockchain initiatives and blockchain research projects. In Melbourne, there's actually even a dedicated blockchain space called, the Melbourne Blockchain Centre.
Yeah, the Blockchain Centre,
Blockchain Global.
Yeah, I've been there.
It's a great space, and there's all sorts of interesting activity taking place there.
So let's talk a little bit about the future. Are you seeing a change? And I mean, for example, in your industry, in the fintech industry, in the future, maybe more members, more and more are going to use blockchain to make financial service instead of the traditional startups. So in the future, most of the companies are going to use blockchain.
I do think that will happen, but only very slowly. And to be honest, I think that we're not really, certainly at the moment, we're not really seeing that blockchain as a technology is really going to be adequate for some of the use cases that are critically important to us right now. One of the questions I get asked a lot, for example, is whether or not it would be better to build Australia's new payments platform, which is a piece of infrastructure that the major banks have basically invested billions of dollars into to build recently in an effort to effectively give Australian consumers and businesses real-time payments. And that project is due to come online in January, February of next year. And I think when we look at that and we look at the sheer volume and speed and the variety of different types of payments that need to go through that platform, I'm not sure that we would, and in fact, many of the sort of blockchain people I know would actually say, well, yeah, we're not really sure that blockchain is quite capable of handling something of that size just yet. The speed of transactions and the speed of settlements required at the level of, or the numbers in required. I mean, think about the number of transactions that you make as an individual every day and then multiply that by 23 million Australians, not to mention the 1 million over small businesses that are, running transactions all the time. So I think there are certain use cases where blockchain will certainly become tested and proved to be a much more efficient method of operation. There's still a lot of technical challenges still being explored with respect to, or even sort of fundamental questions around whether or not people should be pursuing this on private or public blockchains. But again, I think, there's so much room and appetite for experimentation in the future. I certainly think a lot of that will accelerate, and we will see a lot more implementations and executions of blockchain technologies in financial services applications. It's just a matter of time. And I think in Australia, that will probably happen a little more slowly than other countries, just because I think we have such a advanced financial services ecosystem in some respects that actually kind of slows the rate of innovation because, people have effectively invested already in significant infrastructure, and there's a lot less incentive for them to test completely new technologies. But that said, Australia is certainly very, very good at, testing and, developing out research.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if we find the right partners to develop those innovations with, to test in other smaller markets, it will certainly be Australian innovators leading the charge in how we do that. So I'd certainly expect to see some interesting announcements in partnerships with countries like, hopefully we can get some partnerships with countries like China and Philippines and Indonesia,
mm-hmm.
where there's lots of opportunities with very little infrastructure existing.
So in my point of view, I think cryptocurrencies or blockchain is for being mainstream, the people has to use it, make transactions, like send money. So, for example, I realized yesterday that some NEM, they're gonna open a bar in Tokyo, so you can pay your beers, your sake with NEM or Bitcoin. So things like that, I think it's easy for the people to understand and makes the cryptos mainstream.
Absolutely. And I think, the example we were talking about before, Living Room of Satoshi, is a great example of that.
But your bills.
Absolutely. I think the work that NEM are doing is actually really interesting to me, and they've got a very strong presence here in Australia, and have been getting quite embedded in the industry and ecosystem here. But I've also noted some of the stuff that they're actually doing. I think it was in Lithuania with the sponsorship of the basketball team. Think about Fintech. Probably one of the fastest kind of, or one of the major sort of drivers of technology adoption has been basic civilian type initiatives. So whether it's integrating in things like transport systems, public transport, grocery shopping. I mean, part of the reason why Australia is one of the fastest markets to adopt contactless payments is because the major supermarket chains got together with the banks and said, we want to drive this because we want more data about consumer spending habits. So they effectively formed an initiative to actually drive consumer adoption. And so therefore Australia's 23 million consumers basically became, the fastest market to move toward that. And so tap and go is extremely prevalent here. So I think by targeting some of those types of use cases, basic civilian needs, you can really drive some very strong adoption.
I agree. I think maybe next year we can pay our drinks with, I don't care, in Bitcoins or Ethereum or another cryptos.
Yeah, hopefully, though I think that the element of volatility does need to be dealt with, and that is obviously causing some interesting challenges for the industry.
So thank you so much, Danielle, for being here with Cryptoverse.
Awesome. Thanks, Ricardo. Good to chat.
And now, the ICO interview. Today we have Arker. Arker is the first RPG online video game that rewards the user with a cryptocurrency. We are gonna call Juanjo. He's the CEO of Arker. He's in Spain. Hi, good morning, Juanjo. Good morning for you in Spain.
Good morning.
Yeah, welcome to Cryptoverse podcast. Thank you for your time with us. So let's start. Please explain to our audience what's Arker. It's a role-playing game and also an ICO, right?
Arker is it's an online game. It's an RPG, a strategic game. The thing that the game have is that when players win a match online, they will get a reward that is a cryptocurrency. It's a own cryptocurrency called Arker coin.
So what can you do with that Arker coin?
You can use this coin directly in the exchange, or you can use in the game to buy some chest. A chest will reward players with random items and abilities, so they can progress faster in the game.
So, for example, if I invest in the ICO and then you release the game, what is the benefits for the investors? I mean, versus the new user who register later when the game is launched. I mean, you start with nothing, but if I have tokens already, I can buy some items like armor or something like that, or magic things.
Yeah, the first advantage is that you get the tokens cheaper, and the second one is that you can participate in the alpha testing, and also the alpha testers will get unique objects in the game that later players cannot get. So the players who invest in the ICO will start with tokens and also some unique objects and abilities.
Okay, cool. Could you please explain the game rules? It's like Final Fantasy or Pokemon, right?
Yeah, it's a strategic game. So you create your own character. You have 3 characters. You pick a class for the character, and you give your character 8 abilities and some items to get more life and things like that. You search for a game online versus other players, and when the game starts, you get 4 random abilities from the 8 you picked. It's 4 turns. First, one random player starts the game, and he uses an ability and uses some energy. The other player sees the ability, but not the quantity of energy you use. So the other player has to use another ability with his energy. We make an operation for that, and one of the 2 players win the round and make that damage to the other player. So then you cannot use this ability, but you can use one of the other 3 abilities you have. The game ends when the players use the 4 abilities, or one player gets his life below 0.
Okay.
And when the game ends, the player who wins the match, he will get some coins, some gold. Gold is a coin, but it's not a cryptocurrency. It's a virtual coin. And he also gets some experience to level up his character. And then the more level you have, the better items you can have.
So you can get more tokens, right?
Yeah, and you can use some items that you cannot use at the start of the game.
Okay. When is the game ready, or the beta, when we can play Arker?
Yeah, at the first quarter of 2018, in a few months, we are going to release an alpha, so the investors can test the game. And in the next few months, we're going to release a public beta, so all the players can test it and fix some things, add new things.
So in which platforms is going to be available? Smartphones, laptops, computer, PC, Windows?
For starting, we're going to release the game in Android and iPhone. And then in a few months, we're going to release it into Steam. So you can play with a computer or with a smartphone.
Okay, awesome. So I read the ICO, the tokens, is based in waves and not in Ethereum. Why did you choose waves and not Ethereum?
It's because with our model, the server has to do a lot of transactions because when a match takes place and a player wins, we have to make a transaction. So we do not choose Ethereum because we will have to pay a lot of gas.
Okay.
And right now it's expensive. So we choose waves because the nodes of the network have the ability to choose which fees they can accept. We can pay the transactions with our own token. We not lose money. We just pay with our own token.
Okay.
So we talk to the biggest nodes of the network, and they already accept our token to make the transactions. So we can make the game work.
Okay.
And also have our own node.
So let's talk about the numbers of the ICO, because the users like to know the price of the token, the soft and hard cap in euros or in dollars, and also the times of the ICO.
The ICO is already running, and we made a supply of 10 million Arkers. This is the maximum quantity that Arkers will be in the market. So in the ICO, we're gonna to distribute all of the Arkers between the participants of the ICO.
Okay.
So we're not gonna burn any token. When the ICO ends, we're gonna redistribute 3.5 million of Arkers between the investors.
Okay. So when the ICO finish?
The 30th of December, the ICO finish.
Okay, so it's 1 month and a half. People are listening to the podcast and are interested. They can enter in the website, Arker.io, and they can invest. So for invest, you need Ethereum or Waves, or you can buy the
Bitcoin.
Tokens.
Yeah, you can invest in Bitcoin, Ethereum, Waves. You can pay with credit card, an escrow that keeps the wallets and the money of the credit card. So
let's talk a little bit about the team. How's your background, guys? You are experiencing video games or cryptocurrencies, or what's your background? The core team of Arker, we are 5 persons. 3 of them are developers. He has experience in the banking sector. We worked in credit card transactions and things like that, and also with blockchain in some internal projects. Okay. Another one is a system administrator who works in servers and specializes in security. And we have a designer who already made some games. He make a work for Pixar and very important companies and things like that. And also we have advisors from another ICO, that is Creative Chain. And we have another advisor that is Cadence Games. It's a small studio here in Spain. He also made a 3D game, and it's already published in Steam. He are actually working with Sony. Awesome. So do you know if there are more ICOs doing similar things, or you are the only one doing this kind of games with cryptocurrencies? There are other games similar, but are not the same as us. Because we see other games, but the game is while you play, the game mines some coins. All our coins are mined. Yeah, it's totally different. So good luck with the ICO, and thank you so much for your time with Cryptoverse podcast. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye. I'm afraid that this is the end for today. Next week, I'm gonna attend the Blockathon, the biggest blockchain hackathon in Australia. See you soon in the next episode of Cryptoverse podcast. Thank you for listening. Bye bye. Hasta la vista.